It was the late 1950s and people were optimistic. Rock and roll was new.
A rare masterpiece in all the things that make a Cadillac.
Cars had fins.
There is its clean, graceful symmetry of line.
And World War II seemed like a long time ago. Yep, the American dream was in full swing.
What is happening in this divided city is merely the most recent and most dramatic manifestation of the increasing tension in a divided world.
But for the men and women in the military, that dream was quickly becoming a nightmare because the Cold War was upon us. Communism was on the rise.
Only 90 miles from the United States, where Castro has admitted his communist sympathies and where communist propaganda is being manufactured and communist leaders are being trained for export to every nation in Latin America.
Nuclear weapons were being developed around the world.
Strategic weapons at the president's disposal include the continent-spanning Atlas missile, which is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead into the very heart of the enemy's territory.
And America and Russia were locked in a race for not only air superiority, but for outer space as well. All of this meant that America needed a way to keep tabs on what was going on around the world. And the best way to do that was with a spy plane. Now, spying on an opponent or an enemy to learn their strengths and weaknesses, man, that's been around forever. I think that's the second oldest profession. But in World War II, spying or aerial reconnaissance usually involved a guy hanging out of a slow-moving aircraft with a camera. Well, in the jet age, with radar and missiles, fire. Man, that wasn't going to cut it. So, in the 50s, Lockheed started developing a special spy plane. And in 1959, they came up with a breakthrough in design and shape that would make a plane virtually invisible on radar. And it was just in time, too, because shortly thereafter, Gary Powers was shot down in his U-2 spy plane over Russia. And the order came down for President Eisenhower to build the impossible, a plane that flew so high and so fast that it could never be shot down or captured. So Lockheed did the impossible. They built the SR-71 Blackbird. The SR-71 Blackbird was like nothing anybody had ever seen. Measuring a little over 100 feet long, it looked like a needle with wings. The shape of the fuselage was completely revolutionary for the time because it was flattened down and the sides were shaped into little fins that ran the whole length of the fuselage. This design reduced radar cross-section by 90% and at the same time increased lift and performance.
You can see the rudders are canted in some. It's so that the radar would bounce off the rudders away from the receiver of the radar. And that was another reason for the chine, the flared area along the side. So radar would, instead of being reflected directly back to the receiver, a lot of it would be deflected in another direction. So that chine was early stealth technology. We'd take off and go to the tanker at 25,000 feet. Once we passed 40,000 feet, the RSO in the back would turn off our self-identification and the altitude information. Then we would just fly where we needed to fly, and the ground controllers would not know where we were going.
Two Pratt & Whitney J58 turbojet engines were nestled into a huge delta wing with very distinctive twin-angled rudders. And this combination gave the SR-71 a cruising speed over 3 times the speed of sound, or Mach 3.2 to be exact. But that's not all. This bird could soar to an incredible altitude of 85,000 feet, which is knocking on the door of where the atmosphere ends and outer space begins.
And you could see a definite curvature on the Earth. We were above 97% of the air molecules, so it was very, very dark overhead and then a bright band of blue on the horizon. So you had the sensation of being at the edge of space. No wind, no turbulence, so it was a real smooth flight.
To bear the stress of this kind of sustained speed and altitude, titanium was used in most of the structure. Ironically, this titanium was made from ore that came primarily from the Soviet Union through covert channels. So, unknowingly, the Russians were actually helping to build the plane that would eventually spy on them.
Normal aluminum alloys would just get too soft at those high temperatures, so he built most of the airplane out of titanium, and he had to pioneer manufacturing techniques with titanium, and it was pretty tricky.
To deal with the high temperatures generated in flight, a special high-temperature paint was developed, and that gave the plane its distinctive black color and thus its nickname. The body panels were designed to fit loosely on the ground, causing the airplane to leak fuel on the tarmac. Of course, once in the air, everything would heat up and expand a few inches, sealing everything up.
So you'd go out to fly the airplane and there would be a big puddle of fuel underneath the airplane. It was a special fuel called JP7. It had a high flash point, and they told me you could just throw a match in that fuel under the airplane, it would put the match out. I never did actually try that, but that's what they claim.
Due to the incredible stress that occurred during flight, the SR-71 required extended turnaround time between flights because it was common for the planes to return with rivets missing and delaminated panels or other parts needing repair or replacement. So maintenance was an ongoing thing to keep the SR-71 flying, kind of like a supersonic Harley. The two-man crew was protected by special pressurized flight suits that looked like something astronauts would wear.
If you're above 63,000 feet and you lose pressure on your body, your blood starts to boil. It always ruins your whole day whenever your blood starts boiling.
Yeah, I would think that'd be a problem.
So the pressure suit would keep us alive until we got down.
And the plane carried no weapons because the Blackbird's extreme speed and high altitude meant it could outrun or outfly any rocket or jet or missile in existence. A fact that was proven time and time again, as literally thousands of missiles were fired at SR-71s over its 35 years of service, and never once was one shot down or captured. When the pilot put the hammer down on the SR-71, everything else was left choking in the dust.
When that afterburner lit, you could feel a kick in the pants.
So, just how fast was the Blackbird? Well, it was fast enough to fly from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in under 68 minutes.
So we took off from Palmdale on March the 6th, 1990, got a full load of fuel and then lit the burners. And when we crossed the East Coast, the Blackbird had set a new transcontinental speed record for an airplane. So no airplane has ever crossed coast to coast across the United States faster than the Blackbird did that day. They wanted us to make a couple of passes for the crowd, so we circled around and then we made our low approach just below 200 feet and lit the afterburner for the crowd so they could feel the power of those two big engines and see the beauty of those orange plumes coming out of the back of that beautiful black airplane. Even though I was the pilot and JT was the RSO, we were just lucky to be the crew that day. It could have been any of the crews could have done the same thing, so it's the Blackbird's record.